the Gifted Independent Project course at Cheltenham High School. So why is there this need for the Gifted Independent Study course? We have to go back to defining gifted education and what that means. So a student who has a GIEP conforms to two parts of an equation. The first is that the child has been identified as having outstanding intellectual ability. And the second part of the equation is that we recognize that they have or still have a need for specially designed instruction. So what that means when we're thinking about the high school, if you look at this graph along the bottom, you see K through 12, that's the grades, and then from bottom to top is a measure of the maximum level of rigor that we can offer in the general education setting. And you can notice on this graph that starting in 7th grade, the level of rigor increases significantly from year to year. And that is because we are able to offer more and more high-level rigor courses for students in the regular ed setting. And so by the time a student is in 12th grade, they can, in theory, be taking very high-level and advanced placement courses throughout their entire schedule. And that, in that case, just being a regular student matriculated into regularly available courses places them at a very high level of rigor. And so when we're talking about students needing specially designed instruction, what it means is that students need something that goes beyond what can be offered even in those really high-level courses. And so one misnomer is that if a student is in many advanced placement courses, that's meeting their gifted needs. And the truth is, it's not. In order for a student to have their gifted needs met, they need something that goes beyond even more than high-level courses. So just two quick examples. Jane Doe, she was identified as gifted in elementary school, and every year that she has been at Cheltenham School District, including her high school experience, she has had a need for specially designed instruction. John Doe, on the other hand, he was identified as gifted in elementary school, and he needed specially designed instruction for many years. However, when he transitioned to the high school, as more and more advanced placement courses were available for him to take, but he opted not to take those courses, it meant that the rigor level that was offered in the regular gen ed classroom was actually exceeding what his needs were. And so in his case, he no longer needs a GIEP because although he still has outstanding intellectual ability, he no longer needs specially designed instruction. So then this brings up a big question about how we best meet the needs of gifted students at the high school who need specially designed instruction. And so you can see here that the triangle in red is representing the high school years for gifted students. How do we go beyond the needs of gifted learners during those years when we know that we're able to offer such high-level coursework? And that's where this course comes into play, trying to meet this particular need. So how are we going to do that? How do we meet their need for specially designed instruction at a high school that has many advanced placement and honors level courses available? So here's the basic goals. Number one is to allow students to pursue their areas of interest and the areas that we have identified that they have particular gifted ability sets, and to be able to do that with few limitations, to tear down the barriers and let the students run as far as they can with their interests and abilities. That's one of the things that we can do for them. Number two is to allow them to explore the depths of knowledge and skill sets that go well beyond what you would normally experience in a K-12 curriculum. And lastly, for them to engage in learning that will live with them for years to come and help them live up to their potential in a 21st century context. So if we can provide for these three things, we know that we're meeting those needs of SDI because we're going beyond what a child would normally experience K-12. So that's where this idea of combining two things together has come about. The first piece is an independent study, which is relatively self-explanatory. However, a traditional independent study is where a student identifies something they want to learn about or do, and they more or less on their own engage in that work. A separate component is something called design thinking, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But what we have done is incorporated and pushed these two things together. It's a design thinking course that is built around an independent study. So design thinking is an idea, it's a process that people in industry use in order to innovate solutions to very challenging problems, or what they call specifically in design thinking, the term is called a quote-unquote wicked problem. Design thinking was something that was recognized by a company called IDEO, which is a design firm, and Stanford University's D School. And they often will say that they recognized design thinking. They didn't invent it. It was something that was being used in various ways by innovative individuals and organizations to solve these wicked problems. And what IDEO and the D School did was simply codify what already existed. And so it's something that gets used in medicine, industry, engineering, design, education, the social sciences, business, and increasingly in government, the military, education, and other avenues as well. So some misnomers. Number one, there's this idea that innovation or being innovative is an event. You know, it's a eureka moment. You wake up in the middle of the night with this idea and genius occurs. And that's not really true. And the second misnomer is that innovation is a product. So if you're innovating, it means you're creating something that is going to be sold, or that innovation always exists in the space of that which can be sold. But both of these don't quite capture what innovation really is. Innovation is a process, and specifically, it's a design process. And that's where this idea of design thinking comes in, which is that design thinking codifies the process that individuals go through when innovating. So sometimes design thinking is shown to be a circular process like you see here. You start at the beginning, you work your way to the end, and then you sort of start all over again. Sometimes it's shown as a kind of combination of a linear process that then goes into a kind of swirling circular process. The classic example here would be the iPhone 1 was going through that linear process, and then once it went to market, it then has just been gradually getting better and better over the years as it goes into the sort of circular part that you see on the right. Sometimes it gets described as a linear process, but also one where the designer will bounce back and forth between different phases as necessary. So it's somewhat linear, but also highly flexible. In Cheltenham, we are largely following the sort of traditional 5-step process that you see here: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. And a lot of these ideas are encapsulated in one of our classroom texts called The Field Guide to Human-Centered Design. We use other texts as well. However, I share this one because if you Google this title, there's actually a digital version of the book on IDEO's website that you can peruse to maybe learn a little bit more about what this looks like. So some examples of projects that have been done in the past. One is working with the Innocence Project to free wrongly convicted prisoners. Another is writing a history book about missing information for key historical figures, or creating a documentary about the root causes of gun violence. Create a podcast for an episode of This American Life. Do a fundraiser to help a community do a pay-to-play and donate to a cancer or a nonprofit fund. Another would be an example of doing a conversational podcast about political culture from the perspective of a teenager in today's world. Create an app to support teen mental health. Write a book. Develop a teaching unit. Research history to answer or support a question and then apply to today. This is just a very small sampling of the kinds of things that individual students are going to engage in. So what are the details of the class? What does it actually look like? How does this all come together? So the first piece is that the 5-step design thinking process is something that will be led by a challenge consultant at the high school, and it's something that will be experienced simultaneously by all students in the class. However, each student has their own independent and unique project. So they're following that 5-step process, guided by a teacher, in lockstep, so to speak. However, each student in the class is doing their own independent project. So it's both guided, but also independent. All the students will be collaborating with each other in the process of creating their projects. The student is responsible for the delivery of their product, but their peers are there to act as fellow designers. Students, when necessary, can be partnered up with CHS content-specific teachers. So if a student is working on a project that is chemistry-based, they can work with their chemistry teacher as part of the specially designed instruction. Classes are small. Typically, we're looking at about 10 students or less. And it's going to be scheduled as a full year major. What that means is that it's half a block all year long. And the student will receive the credit of a major course at the end of the school year. The course will be taken by gifted students each year throughout their CHS career, meaning a student will be taking the same class in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Why are we designing it this way? Doesn't that just mean the students are doing the same thing every year? And the answer to that is yes. It's done that. We're doing this by design. So each year, the student will more deeply develop their design thinking skills. Our view is that as 9th graders, they will get introduced to the 5-step process, how to work in it, and what it looks like to go through the process of creating an idea and seeing it through to fruition by the end of the year. Then as they start to engage with it year after year, they become more and more expert in the utilization of the design thinking process. And our goal is for our seniors to be experts in design thinking so that when they leave Cheltenham High School, this is a skill set that they will be able to take with them into college and into the workplace. And also, just as a note, students will have the option to take the course some of the years when they're in high school. They can also opt to not take the course in other years, depending on other course loads that they're trying to fit in, their general interest and needs, etc. If you have questions, please reach out to the challenge consultants at either Cedarbrook or the high school, depending on what grade your student is in. And thank you for tuning into this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you in the Independent Student Project course.